get started here, so take your seats. All right, welcome to Speak Up Newport. My name is Ed Selich, President of Speak Up Newport. First of all, I want to thank the Bungalow for the food before the program starts. Remember, please support the Bungalow. They support Speak Up Newport, great restaurant in Corona del Mar, so give them all the support you can. Got a great program for you tonight on Proposition 1. How it's going to affect Newport Beach, and we have with us this evening Lauren Kleiman, member of our City Council. Lauren was elected to the Council in 2022. She's Vice Chair of the Newport Beach Aviation Committee. She's the city's delegate on the Southern California Association of Governments, normally called SCAG. She's the District 15 representative for the Orange County Council of Governments, OCOG. Prior to being elected to the City Council, she was a member of the Aviation Committee and the City Planning Commission, and she was on that for 6 years before being elected to Council. She's a founding member of and on the board of the Newport Beach Foundation. She started a parent education series to help families navigate through difficult issues, and is doing other things on the Newport Beach Foundation organization. She received her JD in Certificate in Dispute Resolution from the Pepperdine School of Law. She resides in Corona del Mar with her husband Mark and son. And before I welcome her, when it comes time for question and answers, please go to the microphone in the center of the room. This is being recorded and shown on TV, so we want people to hear your questions before she gives the answer. So with that, I give you Lauren Kleiman.
Do you mind if I stand up here instead of sit over there? Okay. Dealer's choice. Well, I sound really busy when Ed introduces me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. A lot of familiar faces out there. Before I jump in, I just want to preface this presentation by saying that everyone is really trying to digest the contents of Prop 1 and get their arms around it. And so even those who are responsible at the state level for administering it, I think are trying to figure out exactly how it's going to be implemented. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Prop 1 passed. That happened. We were told when it was rolled out, don't even bother fighting it. This is the governor's initiative. It's happening. He needs this. He wants this. And, we'll figure out the guidelines to put in place later. As you can see, it barely passed by less than 27,000 votes out of 7.2 million. It was defeated in actually 42 of the 58 counties statewide and defeated in Orange County by 16%. So not exactly the overwhelming passage that everyone was expecting, or at least what we were told. Okay, so what exactly is Prop 1? The first part of Prop 1 is that it modifies the Mental Health Services Act to include substance abuse disorders and actually reallocates some of the funding away from counties to the state. And a lot of counties are going to be forced to redirect about a third of their existing mental health programming away from that and towards housing interventions instead. The second part of it is what you see on this slide. It's a $6.3 billion bond, meaning the state has to pay it back with interest over time. 4.4 of that is for more mental health and drug and alcohol treatments, which or facilities, which translates, we're told, to about 11,000 plus beds. Another $2 billion for housing for homeless, those at risk of becoming homeless, and people with mental health or addiction challenges. Okay, so what's the problem, right? We all can agree that we need to address these issues. We know we have rising rates in homelessness. We know that we have a mental health problem as well as addiction challenges statewide. The problem is that these funds are going to be allocated by the state, and these facilities and units will be entitled to go into any city by right. So first, we know that the state has already spent, if you're following the news, about $24 billion on homeless programs over the last few years, and they have nothing to show for it. In fact, this last year, homelessness rose about 6%. Second, Newsom's Care Court program was already promised to be a solution for homeless with mental health issues. It was rolled out last fall, and what we're seeing so far is there's very low enrollment, and only a small number of those are actually homeless individuals. Third, these mental health resources were intended to serve the community where they sit, but are often drawing people from out of the city, outside the region, and even outside the state. And anecdotally, what we're finding is that our homeless shelters are seeing individuals come in who have been kicked out for one reason or another. Either they violate the rules or their benefits run out. In other words, this is a problem that is actually contributing to the homeless problem rather than to the solution. Lastly, the state has been responsible for licensing sober living, detox, social rehabilitation, and other group homes for this population. And they've done a terrible job vetting and monitoring operators and ensuring the safety of those both seeking care and the neighboring residents. So what does by right mean? Essentially, it means that the local jurisdictions must allow these projects and the facilities without any public input, and the city cannot impose any conditions or restrictions. Before Prop 1, the state allows for group homes with 6 or fewer beds to go into any residential neighborhood, and yes, that includes if you live in an HOA, still applies. It supersedes your CC&Rs without any deference to the city's zoning laws or the permitting process. The stated purpose of this is to allow those seeking treatment to get well in a residential versus an institutional setting. And in the eyes of the law, residents of these facilities are a protected class, and they're considered disabled due to their addiction. And so this 6 or fewer beds, this type of group home is typically what we see because none of these operators want to have to go through the city process. So most of the facilities that are opening and have been opening for the last several years just open up with 6 or fewer beds, and you know, they just open their doors after they have their state permit or license, and in some cases are still pending and open their doors. Until now, cities have been allowed to require facilities with 7 or more beds to go through the permitting process, as I explained, although several of these ordinances have actually been challenged in court as discriminatory. And recently, an Orange County judge just issued a ruling against the city of Anaheim for denying a permit for a 16-bed facility for mentally ill homeless women. And the state joined that case against Anaheim, arguing that cities have to allow this and other facilities like it. And the court agreed. We're assuming that Anaheim will appeal this, but we're watching closely, and I've reached out to their counsel, to offer any support that we can provide. So now, after Prop 1, the short answer is we're not sure how this is going to play out. But these funds, some of these funds, will go towards creating more of these facilities or housing units that will be allowed to go, again, any property that's zoned specifically multifamily, retail, office, or parking, anywhere in any city. And there's no language restricting the number of beds, capping the number of facilities. So again, we don't know if one will be imposed or allowed for group homes or other facilities. So this is why we're concerned. This is what we've seen with the existing state licensed facilities. These are some excerpts from our first responders' calls for service logs at some of the group homes locally that we don't see in other residences in the city. So if you can see up there, a lot of overdoses, calls for medical aid, suicidal threats, missing adults or juveniles, domestic disturbances. And this is what we're seeing throughout the industry. Again, overdoses and other deaths, negligence, insurance fraud, body brokering. This most recent federal indictment for body brokering mentions the operator was paying several $1,000s to body brokers per patient to bring them in the door. I mention this because it highlights just how much money there is to be made in this industry. If they're paying thousands just to get someone in the door for referral fees, obviously there's plenty of profit margin to spare. When Obamacare was passed, it created parity between mental health coverage and other health coverage. So insurance companies have to pay for rehab and other services. In other words, make no mistake, this is a big and extremely lucrative business. The other problem is overconcentration. These maps from the Orange County Grand Jury report on group homes illustrates the concentration of these facilities in Southern California, which is home to more than half of the state's rehab facilities. Orange County in particular has one of the heaviest concentrations in the country, because what better place to send your loved one to get well, right? Drug and alcohol rehab facilities are exempt from Community Care Facilities Act, which contains restrictions that are intended to protect the character of our residential neighborhoods. Also, California Health and Safety Code sections 1520.5 and 1267.9 require that the licensing agencies deny an application for a new residential facility license that's too close, in some cases 300 feet to 1,000 feet, to an existing facility, resulting in overconcentration. But this is not followed by the state licensing agencies. Having multiple rehabs on one block or in one community negates the intention to have people integrate and get treatment in a regular neighborhood rather than an institutional setting. Okay, so shifting gears, you all want to know, so what are we going to do about it, right? That's the most important question. The biggest step forward in affecting policy changes that we've taken is initiating an audit of the Department of Healthcare Services, which is one of the two agencies responsible for issuing permits to these recovery homes. We drafted a request and worked with our legislative partners to get it approved with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. And just like the audit that was done recently on homeless in the state, we're looking to expose the lack of oversight. We're looking at the flaws in the licensing system that demonstrate the need to change the legal framework in order to protect against bad operators and ensure accountability for positive outcomes. The audit was delayed, but it's underway and is expected to be completed this summer. We were hoping that we would have the results sooner and that we could have then put forth some proposed legislation for this session. Unfortunately, we will now be looking at that for next year instead, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. And we're also going to be working with our representatives to support an audit of the Department of Social Services, which again is the other state agency responsible for issuing these group home licenses. I did a public records request recently that showed 53 overdoses and 128 quote-unquote questionable deaths in just the last 3 years for DSS Department of Social Services licensed facilities. So can only imagine what it's going to look like for the Department of Healthcare Services. The other thing that we are doing is battling this out in the court system. Newport Beach was actually one of the first cities to litigate the issue. In 2008, when we adopted a restrictive ordinance to institute a buffer between these facilities, which had begun to proliferate in the city, we spent about $10 million defending those suits. Now, a few years ago, Costa Mesa adopted a similar ordinance, and they also got sued by the group home operators. The basis of these suits is always the same. As I mentioned before, that these group homes are intended to serve a protected class, in this case addicts, and therefore anything directed at the creation of different standards for these facilities is discriminatory on its face. Many of these cases have been appealed to the Supreme Court. This past year alone, Newport Beach joined several amicus briefs to support the appeal of these Costa Mesa cases, and we've been actively lobbying other cities to join these amicus briefs as well to substantiate the need for the higher court to take the review. Unfortunately, the first one was denied. The second is still pending consideration. The good news is, since the audit and appeals positions that we took, 8 facilities in the city have closed. Sober Living by the Sea also abandoned their settlement agreement, which afforded them the right to operate up to 204 beds in the city. So they just walked away from that. They didn't assign them, which they could have sold their rights and did not do that. In 2008, the city had a total of 73 facilities. 48 of those were licensed and 25 of them were unlicensed. Today, there are 30 licensed facilities citywide. The city also voted to leave the League of California Cities. We've been paying dues to the League of Cities for years with the expectation that they would be a strong voice of advocacy on state issues that have critical implications for Newport. They've certainly taken positions in the past that we haven't necessarily agreed with them on, but never one that's in direct contradiction with both their own mission statement and our values. But in this case, as you can see, their mission statement is to protect local control. Supporting Prop 1, even though it explicitly contains a by right provision, as I talked about earlier, is not only contrary to their mission, like I said, and our needs, it's advocacy in favor of state control over local control on an issue that this city and this county have both been deeply, deeply struggling with for well over a decade. And now that we see just how slim the margin was on this ballot measure, we know that if Cal Cities had taken a position of opposition, that they probably would have been successful in killing it. Since we made the decision to leave, 3 other Orange County cities have followed suit, and I know there are others that are considering the same after the next dues cycle or before at the next dues cycle. And the lion's share of the work here is at the legislative level. We've been supporting and tracking a number of relevant bills in this session, but in every session previously as well. AB 2021 was a bill that would have mandated a 300-foot distance between licensed recovery facilities or sober living homes, and would have required DHCS to notify cities and counties of any new license issued to sober living homes in their jurisdiction. SB 1334 defined sober living homes and would have given local jurisdictions authority to require permits for sober living homes that serve 7 or more residents with minimum distancing of about 1,000 feet between facilities. Unfortunately, both of these bills are dead and will not move forward. The committee chairs made it very clear that any bill that seeks to protect neighboring residents rather than the individual seeking care would not even be considered. And this is what we've seen consistently year after year when bills that we've supported or helped draft have not been successful. Encouragingly, there are a couple of bills that look like they may be moving forward and may afford us some additional protections. AB 2574 proposes to align reporting requirements for DHCS certified or licensed facilities with those of skilled nursing facilities. This bill would exempt an unlicensed home for a person recovering from alcoholism or drug abuse in a neighborhood zone for residential use from being considered a residential use of property if the evidence suggests that the facility is an integral part of a licensed drug treatment facility located elsewhere. AB 2081 imposes new requirements on sober living home operators by requiring them to post on their website if they have been the subject of a disciplinary action or enforcement by DHCS. This is encouraging if it goes through, because again, we do want to protect the people getting care in these facilities, and we're not seeing that. So if people at least are aware of past events, they can make their decisions accordingly. SB 913 permits city attorneys or district attorneys in cities or counties as specified and with the consent or approval of DHCS to enforce certain provisions or conduct and have unannounced or announced visits of these licensed alcohol or drug recovery treatment facilities. These last three bills that I mentioned are still pending, and we've written letters of support and are using our best lobby efforts to see those be successful. And again, our primary goal here is the same as with initiating this audit. We want to establish the need for more oversight and protections that would serve for a basis for new legislation. And lastly, I'll just say we're also participating in the process of these agencies looking to get public input on the administration and implementation of these bond funds. And we're using that opportunity to assert the objection to adding any new facilities to the existing overconcentration in our community, and then asking for funds to be allocated to cities like ours for the purpose of local enforcement to ensure proper operation, oversight, and community safety. And if the response is no, they're not willing to do that and they're not going to set aside funds for that again, we will use that response as the basis for new draft legislation. Questions? I know I threw a lot at you.
It's a long question in a way. I mean, when I read about and hear about the homeless problem, I mean, I sort of think there's three groups: the people that have mental health problems, people who have drug problems, people who have just economic problems. They can't afford housing. And one thing when you're talking about, it seems like the assumption is small units like 6 beds scattered around the community is the best way to address the problem, but they don't. If you have a small facility, you don't have resources for that smaller group. And is there any, I mean, is that the basic fundamental approach to dealing with this? I mean, would we be better off if we had larger facilities with medical facilities adjacent, as incorporated in drug treatment? And I'm just wondering about the whole approach to this. Are we headed in the wrong direction? I mean, that maybe there's no way to change it, but I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, no, those are excellent points. And all I can say as it relates to Prop 1 and these measures, this is state programming that that again, cities don't have any control over. To answer your question about the quote unquote right way to address homelessness, I don't know that anyone has really figured out certainly a one-size-fits-all approach, because I don't think that there is one. I think there are a lot of different resources that are needed. I think that the governor and the legislature has tried in this bill to come up with an all-encompassing solution for me, whereas maybe some of these programs are the right methods. The devil is in the detail, so it's going to come down to how they're implemented. And I don't disagree about the focus on residential group homes and looking to that as a solution, because I don't think it is. And as I said in my earlier comments, we actually know that it's contributing in some cases. So we know that what the state has done to date isn't working, and they've tried a lot of different things. They also haven't been tracking the progress, the outcomes. That's something that we do in Newport Beach. Any program that we spend tax dollars on, any efforts that we're putting forth in the city, we know exactly, how many people we're talking to, how many times we're talking to those individuals, and what services we have to connect them to. And once we do, we're tracking their progress through the system, and then we can reevaluate every so often and look to see, are they effective? Do we need to change something? I'm not convinced, obviously neither is the audit committee, that the state is doing the same thing.
It wasn't clear from your presentation, but as a result of Proposition 1, can a sober living facility open anywhere in the city of Newport Beach, regardless of the zoning, from Fashion Island to the peninsula to anywhere, and an unlimited number of beds? Yes.
Short
Yes or no?
answer is yes.
Yes or no?
Yeah, so prior to Prop 1, they can open in any residential neighborhood and not go through the city's process if they have 6 or fewer beds. After Prop 1, they can go into any multifamily, office, retail, or parking zoned property, and there's no
city
cap
licensing or anything like that.
no permit required by the city at all.
Okay, and this is for addiction, this could be mental illness, this could be whatever disability there is.
Correct.
And unlimited number of beds.
Right.
So you might have a mixed use development where there's retail, there's residential, and then there's a sober living facility.
Or just a facility that goes in place of something that would have otherwise been mixed use.
Correct. That boggles the mind. Thank you.
Hi. I may be wrong, but to my knowledge, the 6-bed limitation is because they do not have to be regulated. They offer no services. They offer a bed. And they make a lot of money because they buy homes that have a lot of bedrooms in them, and they don't regulate. They don't have a physician there. They don't have anybody that does drug treatment or anything. And that's what I've been hearing for years, not just here, but in this state, because of the rules and the laws that we have. So if that's the case, that's the reason we have so many small facilities, is because 7, then you have to get a regulation, and then you have other rules that you have to follow.
Yeah, so
Is that true?
The state agencies do have certain requirements in order to get a license, and you do have to have a doctor's licensed physician attached to your application, but that physician does not need to be on site. They don't need to be present. Obviously, they're not, sleeping there 24 hours a day for these live-in group homes. But most of the programs are wraparound. They do provide services. It's not just a bed. When I talk about beds, I'm just talking about the permitting process, 6 versus 7 or more.
Well, I'm aware of what you're saying, but I also know people that have been approached to have these facilities, and that's all they want. They told them how much money they could make just having having that facility, and that they didn't have to worry about any of the other details, just had to have a bed in each bedroom. So, like I said, I might be wrong, but
No, you're generally correct. And again, there's a lot of money to be made in the industry. And if it's a good operator, that's one thing. But if we're seeing overdoses and people leaving these facilities in the middle of the night, and no one is tracking where they're going, and they're unwell or they need other services. Again, there's no oversight. There's no accountability towards an outcome. We don't know, are these individuals getting the proper care? Are they having positive outcomes, or are they winding up on the street, or are they spending 30 days in a group home and then back again in 6 months? Or so these are all questions that we don't have answers to, and for the most part we're not really allowed to ask the questions because it's discriminatory to even look. You can object and assert HIPAA privacy considerations, et cetera. So it's not that we're opposed to people getting help. We want to protect the people who need this help just as much as we want to.
no, I know. And my second comment is much more positive. I think Newport Beach is doing an amazing job. I've been following it since inception, and they really do have a great program. They care about helping people, and they're so kind when they go out to talk to people. I've witnessed it before, and they're so kind. They're not confrontational, they're not anything else. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your comment.
I heard you mention the year 2008 a couple times, and I believe city-initiated litigation and $10 million of legal expense, appeal to a Supreme Court, one being declined to be heard. Did the city prevail in any way in that litigation, or is the city the appellant?
So in that litigation, there were settlements that came out of that. One of the settlements was, I don't know if you were in the room when I mentioned, the one that just actually vacated all of their holdings and their rights in the city. The Costa Mesa litigation that's still ongoing is in various stages of appeal.
Okay, and you've heard me speak a little bit about homelessness in the other building. As I've said, I don't think the city should do anything to contribute to that. And with the, rent increases that the Harbor Commission has recommended for the liveaboard people of 300 to 500%, that will be coming before you in short order. And I encourage you not to increase the amount of homeless people in Newport Beach.
I was wondering how you were going to incorporate moorings into this conversation. You did it.
Lauren, Philip Betancourt, not a resident at this time, but a two-term past president of the Newport Coast Community Association. Very proud of our community work there. Refresh us, please, on how mandatory membership community associations like the Newport Coast, for instance, are treated then under the new law. What rights do those associations have to assert their land use rules?
So the short answer is most of the state laws that are all the housing coming down from the state of late, including these programs that are part of the Prop 1 measure, are exempt from, they supersede your HOA documents. So you can have any provision in your, for example, most associations have provisions relating to, single family use only, or don't allow commercial uses, or things of that nature, where you could certainly make an argument that this is more of a commercial use, but in the eyes of the law, this is a residential use, and it's a home like any other home and cannot be treated differently. So if somebody came to your association and wanted to open a group home, there is not anything that your association could do about it. Well, I'm just going to end it there. Yeah.
Troublesome, and I thank you for the hard work that you and the rest of the city family are doing to protect our larger community interest.
Thank you. Thanks for your question and comments.
So, good evening. Thank you for the summary. I live in Corona del Mar. So first of all, the questions. There are 3 types of facilities which DHCS allows people to operate. One is a 6 and under unlicensed. This is what you were describing, where there are no services and people are supposed to be post-treatment living together in a residential setting. The second is 6 and under licensed, where treatment is required to be provided. There is supposed to be a doctor on staff and treatment programs, treatment plans, and only supposed to provide treatment to the 6 people who live in that home. And third, there is a 7 and over license, which is for 7 people or more, and that is called an integral facility. And in some cases, you have multiple 6 and under licenses which operate together as a 7 and over, either by the fact that they operate together or they operate in conjunction with another location. You will also see 6 and unders which operate adjacent to each other with the characteristics of an integral facility, though they are not licensed that way. So that's background. We want to thank Lauren Kleiman and the council for helping to move forward the audit with the Department of Healthcare Services. Assemblymember Dixon has been really involved in getting that in front of the state agencies, which are the department responsible for audits. And the way you can participate, you can submit testimony to the committee that is conducting the audit. And the easiest way to do that is to contact Kristen Valandi, who is the chief of staff for Assemblymember Diane Dixon. So if you contact Kristen Valandi, Vellandi, she will give you the link. She'll show you how to submit the information online. You will get a confirmation from the person who's responsible for the audit, and his name is Chris. What's his last name? Chris Applegate. Mr. Chris Applegate will confirm that your testimony has been received. And this is important because your stories are important and they help put the real situation in front of the auditors to help protect the communities and also the people being served. And finally, as Councilmember Kleiman pointed out, if you need to understand what's really happening in a rehab, if inspections are being conducted, if the rules are being enforced for a particular rehab, file a public records request. And you will get a public record back about how many inspections have actually happened, how many overdoses were there in a location. So the easiest way to file a PRA is to go on the website for DHCS for their PRA. But again, contact Kristen Valandi at the Office of Assemblymember Dixon, and she will help. I know Lauren would also help, but Kristen they have a program. They're locked and loaded, ready to go. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you for all this, Lauren. This is discouraging but important information that we all need to know. Are there any characteristics in common of neighborhoods that these homes open in? And are HOA communities, planned communities very common?
I don't know that I have an easy answer to that. They seem to pop up in all different places. I can tell you in the HOA that I live in Corona del Mar, maybe 2 years ago, we had somebody who was approached to open a facility, and the neighbors encouraged the owner of the home, who was an empty nester and wanted to travel and wanted top dollar for their rental, to please do what was right for the neighbors who had young kids, and were not particularly thrilled about the idea, and so they wound up not proceeding. But again,
so is it typically a home that would be a rental home? Is that typically what's happening?
In some cases, they're purchasing the house. In some cases, they're renting.
Okay.
So there's not really one common theme among them that I can think of. We have certain neighborhoods in Newport, again, where we do have not just overconcentration in a city or in this county, but in a neighborhood, on a cul-de-sac or that kind of thing. So again, if the argument is that this is supposed to be the opposite of an institutional setting, but now you've transformed the neighborhood into essentially that. It's
Yeah.
a head scratcher to me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
You mentioned that it only passed by about a little over 26,000 votes. There was really no organized opposition against Prop 1. Why didn't somebody make the argument or the statement that as a result of Prop 1, you can have a sober living facility next door to you, regardless of your neighborhood, whether you're a business, that there's no local control over the sightings of these facilities? Why didn't somebody was organized to inform the voters of that very important fact concerning Prop 1? Were you afraid of the governor?
So I personally wrote an op-ed
Okay.
on it, and there was plenty of opposition. Maybe it fell on deaf ears. There was actually a lot of opposition from some of the mental health providers in that community because of the redirection of funds away from the county's programs that are already in place. And again, I think we're all trying to figure out exactly how this is going to be administered, and we still don't have answers. But I just want to point out one thing that you said about a group home going in anywhere. That existed prior to Prop 1. The difference is now there's no mention of a limit or a cap, and there's these addition of different zoning areas that are added to places where these homes or facilities, maybe not even a home, but a facility can go.
Lauren, Chuck Fancher. I live in Corona Del Mar. I live in Jasmine Creek. And I go to Gelson's often. And there are a couple of folks, regular clients there in the coffee shop who I have discerned, are probably residents of a mental health home nearby. And they're other than the fact that I could tell that, they drink coffee, they're normal people, they do no harm. My mother-in-law and father-in-law have a facility next to them. They live off of Marguerite. And we thought, this is going to be a problem. And what has turned out is that we thought there'd be all kinds of people coming and going at all hours of the day, and that might be the problem. It didn't turn out to be that way, fortunately. And I think we're all apt to react to this issue with a fear that having it amongst us in our community is going to be uncomfortable. And I think sometimes it can be, and it needs to be guarded. But I think we all have to ask ourselves, turn not to just how do we tamp down access to this care in a system that sounds like the private industry has been incented too greatly to not respond to the money they can make in doing these homes. And economic forces are powerful. It's hard to just stop them. I don't think you have eminent domain and the ability to buy them out of business. So we have to deal with it. But we need to ask ourselves, where should this occur? Where should this function occur? And I might posit that it's no different than a hospital facility who's providing medical care to the community, and that it could be an adjunct to Hoag Hospital or other hospitals where we try to marshal the resources for the mentally ill and sober living. And by the way, I bet you many of us in this room, or some of us, have family members who fall into these categories. I do, and it's real. We have to help and provide for it. But I might think that moving this to a hospital setting as an adjunct is a way to deal with it. So I think we need to think beyond our immediate friction and think about how do we better solve the problem.
I appreciate those comments. And again, I think the city's position is more focused on the type of operator and the vetting process, the licensing process, the ability to protect the individuals getting care in these homes and protect the neighboring residents as well. I won't get into some of the things that have happened in the last few years in the city that have posed concerns and risks to the neighbors. But again, you saw in the presentation the things that are happening inside these homes. And so our position is that we just want more accountability, and we want to know if these are having good outcomes, again, for the people getting care. Because you're right, people do need this. We know we have this problem, both addiction and mental health. The question is this? Somebody asked, posed the question: is this the right way to do it? And is it working? Is there accountability? Are there positive outcomes? Is there proper vetting of the individuals who are working in these facilities, whether they're licensed physicians or not? That's where the focus of the conversation really is. And I agree. We don't want to sound the alarms. We just want to have these guardrails in place for everyone in the community. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me tonight.
Well, thanks a lot, Laura. That was a terrific presentation, and happy to see the council's on top of this. I know when I was on the council, I thought that we pretty much got it under control with sober living by the sea, but that soon proved not to be true. It just seems to be a problem. It just goes on and on and on for us. So thanks a lot for all your hard work on it. Okay, folks, that's it for tonight. Next month we'll have another program, so watch out for our notices, and we'll see you in June.